Good morning, folks. Good to see you back with us this morning as we're continuing in our study with Randy Frazie's book, Think, Act, Believe Like Jesus. We're in virtue number 7 this morning. Good morning, Roger.
Good morning, John. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, did you have a good week this week?
Had a great week.
Always a good week. What can be better than living in
Exactly.
St. Petersburg?
Exactly. It's like always on vacation when I'm home.
Yeah, I mean,
So
like,
awesome.
what do I do? Yeah, vacations are hard to plan when you
That's
live
right.
in St. Pete. Where do you
Exactly.
go? Everywhere
Yeah.
you go, you go down the block.
Yeah.
Anyway, we digress. But good to see you this morning. As I said, we're in virtue number 7 of the 10 virtues of Jesus, the fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, self-control. I always want to sing that song. You know the song. Fruit of the Spirit, smell like coconut. Anyway, that's all the song I sing. But we're on kindness and goodness today. His verse that he uses is 1 Thessalonians 5:15 as a starter. It says, make sure that nobody pays back wrong for wrong, but always strives to do what is good to each other and for everyone else. And he kind of brings into this passage from this passage and the concept of goodness and kindness is that goodness I derive from God. The goodness in my life is something that is God-given. Kindness is how that goodness manifests it through my daily life. And so as we talk about the key question, what does it mean to do the right thing in my relationships? It means, as we talked last week with patience, that it's something that God develops in me. It's part of that fruit of the Spirit that's developing. And so I am good because God develops that in my life, and that goodness manifests itself through how I relate to Roger, how I relate to you. And I think that's an interesting parallel as we talk about this goodness and kindness concept.
Yeah, absolutely. And, there's an intentionality about it as well. We receive our goodness from God, and then we intentionally be kind to others in our relationship. And it's about that action versus reaction. Mm-hmm. And same thing with the patience aspect that we talked about last week. And so there's a number of scriptures that we're going to get into today that kind of talk about it. And, and we have the story of the rich young man that comes to Jesus and asks him, what he needs to do to enter the King of Heaven. And one of the key questions that he asked him, the rich young man asked him, he said, why, Jesus answered, why do you ask me about what is good? And here, obviously Jesus knows God is good. Jesus is God in the flesh. Jesus is good. Every motive that Jesus had on earth was good. His intentions were nothing but goodness and kindness to everyone he met. And so, his goodness was driven by his love of God. His kindness then was the acting out of that goodness of his love of God.
Yeah, and I think when we kind of look at that, that's how we see our nature is as we see Jesus representing the goodness of God in his behavior. Then as one, we're talking about virtues, we're talking this 10-week segments about virtues, about acting like Jesus acted. Then as God develops goodness within me, I will be a kinder person. Mm-hmm. And that's what our hope is. And I think we go back to that passage in that the author begins of 1 Thessalonians 15. It says, make sure that no one pays back wrong for wrong, but always strives to do what is good for one another and for everyone else. And the author makes the point that when we repay evil for evil, we're doing the very basest of things. When we're repaying evil for evil, when somebody does harm to me, I repay them in just the same way. The author in the book goes on a couple paragraph kind of rant that the Greek word for evil is caca, which we all know what means in Spanish, and he makes that reference that's what he's talking about here. We don't repay the very basis of base things. When somebody responds to us in that way, but we respond in a different way. We do things differently because we're a Christian. Yes, people treat me inappropriately. People say inappropriate things to me. People say wrong things to me. People say caca things to me, if I can go there.
Yeah.
And Paul is saying to the church at Thessalonica, Christians don't respond that way.
Yeah, there's a great scripture from Luke that he gives in the book too. A good man brings good things out of the good stored up in his heart. An evil man brings up evil things out of the evil stored in his heart. For the mouth speaks what the heart is full of.
Right, and that's we know that all too well.
Yeah.
I know that all too well. In my life, I speak inappropriately sometimes when things, but I want to realize that's not how I want to represent my God.
Yeah.
That I need to I need to ask God to control that aspect of me and belay that aspect of me, so that the things within my heart are good and righteous. That think on whatever's pure, whatever's righteous, whatever's holy. Think on these things, so that when I am confronted with a situation, that I don't respond evil for evil, but I respond out of kindness because goodness is in my heart. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a great, he goes on from there to talks about something that's very I think is a very interesting analogy he uses, that if I am responding, as Roger and I have said in the beginning of the book, he talks about goodness is an attribute of God. Kindness is how that goodness is displayed in my daily affairs. But it's also possible for a person that's not good to do kind things.
Right.
And I think the author refers to that as kind of like when I see a beautiful piece of fruit in a fruit basket at a friend's house, and I go to grab it and take a bite, and I all of a sudden realize it's fake. Mm-hmm. That it can do more harm than it can do good. And I think the author Frazee goes on to talk about that's kind of the way it is with the understanding of biblical goodness. If I am kind to people, but there's no goodness that backs it up, that's simply kindness on display. That's like artificial fruit. It looks good as I stand from it from afar, but if I try to act on it, it's going to bring me nothing but harm. And so he raises a great question for us in the church today, because Roger and I'm sure you do, have come across people in the church today that are doing kind acts. Mm-hmm. But the reality is there's no goodness that backs it up. I'm reminded of people on mission trips that do service projects around the church. They love doing kind things. They love doing random acts of kindness. But in actuality, we can see that that's just artificial fruit. That's fruit on display. It looks good for the moment. It looks good in the situation. But the actuality is, as we know that individual, we realize there's not any goodness behind that. And that's, the author kind of raises a flag to say we need to be cautious about that in our own life, not just doing kind things because it's the good thing to do, but doing kind things, as Roger wrote, because is the manifestation of what's in my heart.
Yeah. You give a gift to your daughters of a sum of money, and you say, okay, I'm going to give you this sum of money, and it's yours to do whatever you want with. However, I only want you to spend it on this.
Right.
You put a string or an attachment on that, and
yeah.
And so, was it really given out of goodness and kindness, or was it really given out of John's motives?
Out of evil motive. Yeah, wanting to do something, and we've talked to different. We can all realize that we come across people that do these things, that those guys I shouldn't just say those people that we come across that, that guy will give you the shirt off his back. Yeah, he will, but the rest of his life is pretty cruddy. Mm-hmm. So we don't want to look at that as an example. We want to exemplify in our own lives the fact that our kindness that is being manifested in our daily life is an outgrowth of the fruit of goodness.
Right.
And I think there's a big issue that I thought the author did a good job bringing out in this particular chapter.
Yeah. He talks about the loyal love over the long haul is true goodness,
Mm-hmm.
and God has certainly done that with us. And then we're supposed to give up our kindness because of that loyal love over the long term.
Long haul. Very cool. Very cool. And so that's where he quotes in Proverbs verse 26, verse 23. He said, like a coating of silver dross over an earthenware are the fervent lips with an evil heart. Ouch. Yeah. So he's like saying, they made earthenware, they made pottery out of clay. And he said then they put this thin coat of silver over the top of it to make it look like, oh, it's a silver tray. But in actuality, it's just clay and it breaks so easily. And so it's pretty on the outside, but it doesn't stand up to the long haul, the long run as silver does. And so the writer of Proverbs is saying that is how sweet lips are, but with an evil heart. It looks good on the outside, but inside it's full of decay, as Jesus says. And so I just want to raise that flag for my own life, that my kindness needs to represent the goodness that God is developing in me, and to make sure the kind things that I do, as Roger said, don't have strings attached. They don't have some ulterior motive. I'm not just doing it to look good, but I am being kind because it's a representation of the goodness of God.
Yeah, and we talked about too, our speech and the speech of others, and so in the end of that verse too is another one of, though their speech is charming, don't believe them, for 7 abominations fill their hearts.
Yeah.
So the speech is good, the speech is appropriate, but there's no kindness and goodness in the motive behind what they say.
And it's a good check for all of us. I mean, am I saying, when we start back up next year or hopefully soon with our Serve St. Pete projects, don't come unless you really want to serve out of the goodness of your heart? Well, no, because I think in the midst of serving sometimes we can learn, hey, this is an area that I really want to know more about God in my own life. I want to develop that aspect of kindness. But I am saying we need to watch what we do and kind of check what we do. Am I doing a kind act within the church body just to show that I'm doing a kind act? Mm-hmm. Am I giving an offering just to show, hey, look what I can do? Or am I doing kind acts of kindness in the church or in the community or around my neighborhood because that's who I am, that God's developing that nature of goodness, that fruit of goodness within me? Mm-hmm. I think it's a good question to ask ourselves on a regular basis. So we have to ask, so how does goodness and kindness affect us in our daily life?
Yeah, that brings us to our key application of what difference does it make in the way I live?
Yeah.
And so we get, once again, 3 things. And the first one is out of a pure heart to do the right thing for others. Mm-hmm. We seek to build others up. So, I like his statement, in Christ we have a bank account with unlimited kindness. Yeah. And we seek to bless others by giving it away. Yeah. So we tap into that spiritual resource that we have and we give away that kindness.
Yeah, I think there's, when if God is developing this goodness within me, again, it's not something I can do. Mm-hmm. I want to come back to that as we talk about these fruit of the Spirit. It's not something I develop. I'm going to try hard to be gooder. No, God develops goodness. And out of that bank of goodness, I'm able to do unregistered kind things. I'm not, today I got to be kind. No, out of that bank account of goodness, I am a kind person. I hope I'm a kind person. No, let me rephrase it. Out of the goodness of my heart, I am a kind person. And I said, by hope, my desire is to represent that in my daily life. Mm-hmm. And if I have to manufacture kindness, I think is what we're talking about, mm-hmm. then the goodness is not there behind it. We're overdrafting our bank account.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So that's cool. So then the second one is, out of a pure heart, to do the right thing for others, we don't pay back wrong for wrong. Yeah. And then we get to that famous verse in Matthew chapter 5, verse 39 of turning the other cheek.
Mm-hmm.
And so from a biblical, historical standpoint, we associate that turning the other cheek with violence, that, if someone punches you, don't hit them back or whatever.
Right.
But in the biblical sense, or in the history of the times, in the New Testament, it was more about insult.
Mm-hmm.
And so the slap on the face was meant to insult someone in public. So, and Jesus is telling us, take that insult, turn away, offer the other cheek, let them insult you again, but know where your hope is, know where your faith is,
Right.
know where you're getting your goodness and kindness from, show that goodness and kindness, walk away, basically.
Yeah.
Walk away.
And that's that, and we say that's tough. We say that's tough from our worldly perspective,
Mm-hmm.
and that's my sin nature saying that's tough to do.
Mm-hmm.
But as the fruit of the Spirit is developed within us, we find it easier to do.
Mm-hmm.
Not because something I'm manufacturing, but it's because out of that resource of goodness God has developed in me, when a person socially insults me, I can go, yeah, okay, and that's a good place to be.
Yeah.
It's a good place to be. And it's not, that's hard to do. Well, it's hard to do if the fruit's not developing.
Correct.
If the fruit's developing, it becomes easier.
But when we know where our foundation is, where our hope is,
Mm-hmm.
then we know where our reliance is, and that we're not being judged. We are being judged by this world, but we're
Mm-hmm.
not being truly judged by anyone except by God Himself.
Yeah. There's a great verse when we're talking about acting like Jesus did. This reminds me of that great verse in John chapter 13 where Jesus washed the disciples' feet. And I like that verse because of the what Jesus did, and I always have to ask, how could Jesus do that? How could the Son of God, God Himself, stoop to that level of washing, do something that difficult? And it's right there at the beginning in chapter 13 of the Gospel of John, because the writer says, and Jesus, knowing that He had come from God, and knowing that God had put all things in His hands, and that He was going back to God, was able to wash the disciples' feet. And I think it says because Jesus knew where He came from, because Jesus knew who He was in the moment, because Jesus knew where He was going, He was able to do a very base, thankless job. And I think we are the same way as we look at how Jesus acted in this moment. I know I have come from God. I know God is working with me in the moment. And I know my eternal hope is in God. So I can do some difficult things. And I think that's a great example for us. And it talks about living out that goodness and kindness.
Excellent. Then the last one of the day is, out of a pure heart to do the right thing for others, we do the hard thing out of love.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, sometimes we value relationships so much that we have a few good friends, we have a few close people to us, and except here the author's saying that in that moment of goodness and kindness, when I have a friend that's going the wrong direction,
Mm-hmm.
that it is impingent upon me to say, buddy, you're making a wrong call there. And I think the author, Frazee, brings out something that we may lose that friendship in the moment. But ultimately we're doing the right thing for that person. And that's hard.
Yeah.
But I think goodness and kindness here in this last one compels us to be loving and kind even in difficult situations. That's tough.
Yeah, absolutely. And going back to your analogy that he brings out in the book, the fake fruit that we like so much, and if you bit into a piece of fake fruit, you're going to damage some teeth and so on. But the psalmist in Psalm 34:8 brings out, when we think about that fake fruit versus the good fruit, and the fruit that Jesus represented in His kindness and goodness in being of God, but the psalmist actually brings it out, taste and see that the Lord is good.
Absolutely.
I mean, there's actually a physical attribute of the sweet and savory fruit.
Absolutely.
There,
Yeah.
and then take refuge in God, knowing that we can do that.
Great point. The fake fruit, the fake kindness, always
There's no taste.
there's no taste. It potentially
And it
does.
hurts.
It potentially brings harm. But actual goodness and kindness tastes wonderful, and you want another bite.
Yeah.
And I think that's how the author kind of leaves it in taste and see, as Roger said in Psalms 8, taste and see that the Lord is good. Because when you taste it, you won't be disappointed. And when you do the good thing, when the goodness that God has developed in your life manifests itself again in kindness for others, once you do that, you go, oh, I want to do that again.
Yeah.
That was pretty sweet.
One other bite.
That was pretty sweet. I want to do that again. And that individual or that situation will pay, hey, that guy's a good guy. There's something real about that. There's something sweet about what just happened. And they want to know more as well. So it's a great opportunity for us to exhibit and manifest the fruit that God is growing within us. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Roger.
Thank you, John.
Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
See you next week. As we always say, be wise, be safe out there, be kind, allow the goodness of God to exhibit itself in your life, and as always, be the church. We'll see you next week.
Be the church. See you next week.